I'm your host, Michael Messerly, and this is Scary, but True. On August 31st, 2021, around 1 a.m., T was driving along Route 210 near the Black River in North Carolina. It was a beautiful summer night in North Carolina as T drove in this wooded area, listening to music with his windows down, feeling ready to be done driving and relax for the night. It was pitch black outside and T could not see the moon or the stars, only what was illuminated by the headlights of his truck. It was pitch black outside and T could not see the moon or the stars, only what was illuminated by the headlights in his truck. For reference, T was coming around a massive right curve before crossing the river, and then on the other side of that is an old battlefield. As T was about a third of the way through this massive curve, he looks to his right into a ditch next to the road and sees what appears to be a 30-year-old man in a torn-up Civil War uniform, covered head to toe in blood. Clearly concerned and confused by what he saw, T dials 911 to report it, as it was clear that this man needed help. It looks like he may have hit his head with blood pouring down his head and torso. This man is clearly in desperate need of medical attention. As T slows down to find a safe place to stop and help this injured man, all of a sudden he hears a massive bang in the bed of his truck. He actually feels the back of his truck bounce down as if his back tires had hit a pothole. This scares the hell out of T, and he yells, "What the hell was that?" He turns on the light in the bed of his truck, looks in his rearview mirror, and sees a snow-white face pressed up against his back windshield. This creature was looking into the window of his truck, trying to see what was inside. This creature had dark, shallow, sunken eyes, no nose, no ears, and a completely white face. T describes this creature as having a human-like skull with skin stretched thin around it. T immediately starts to scream, "That's not human! That's not human!" He reactively steps on his gas to speed his truck up to around 80 miles per hour and slams on his brakes, sending the scrawny, long-bodied creature flying over the cabin and hood of his truck, rolling as it hits the ground. T stomps on the gas and swerves to the right of this creature as he's just trying to get away as fast as possible. As he passes by, T sees the creature stand up, and this thing is easily 7 feet tall and looks like if you took a normal human being and just stretched them out. It had long dangling arms and long scrawny legs. T looks into his rearview mirror and watches this creature take off into the woods as he floors it down the dark, desolate road. He finally pulls up to a nearby gas station and waits for the authorities so he can try to see what the hell just happened. As he's speaking to the officers, T is staring down the road he just came from, terrified that this thing will come back, looking for him. The officers look over his truck, they inspect the bed and the cabin, and at the top of the cabin there are clear scratch marks, as if this creature was scratching at the top of T's truck, trying to get in. He also thought that maybe after the creature jumped onto the bed of the truck, it tried to latch itself to the top of the cabin and slid back and scraped, trying to balance itself. Now this may sound pretty far-fetched, but here is the incredible 911 call that T made on that dreadful night.
Tender County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm driving on 210. I just crossed the Black River, and I thought I saw a guy standing on the side of the road bleeding.
Okay, where are you at, sir?
I'm on 210. I just crossed the Black River. I'm heading towards 53 East. I just passed Patriots Watch.
Okay, so you're over near Morse Creek?
Yes.
Okay. And did you saw a man standing on the side of the road?
What the?
What was that, sir?
That's not human! That's not human!
Sir, are you okay, sir?
There's something in the bed of my truck!
Okay, what's in the road?
No, it's not in the road. It's in my truck. In the bed.
There's something in the bed of your truck?
Yes, ma'am. I just turned on my bed lights for my truck, and there's something in my bed.
Okay, sir, when you say something, what do you mean?
I just knocked it off of the bed of my truck and went over my roof.
Okay, what was it?
Now, a popular belief is that this creature was a cryptid called a rake, a humanoid cryptid that lurks in forests. The rake is said to have large, dark eyes, pale skin, and a hunched posture. It also likes to stare at its victims before attacking. Regardless of what this thing was, this was a real event, one that T will remember for the rest of his life. Luckily, T got away with only scratches on his car. But next time you're driving late at night in a dark forest, be careful because you may not be so lucky. This happened years ago, back when my family lived in a small house right beside a busy road. Across that road there were stores, everything from a Walmart to a bunch of food places, but on our side, it was all woods, thick, quiet, and shaded. My grandparents lived just on the other side of those woods. The walk through the trees only took a minute or two, and I'd made the trip more times than I could count. Sometimes I'd come across a raccoon or a deer, but that was normal, nothing out of the ordinary. One day, my mom was over at my grandparents' place, and I was home alone. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where the air is full of birds singing and everything feels peaceful. I decided to walk through the woods and join her. I stepped into the trees, surrounded by the warmth of sunlight, filtering through the leaves and the sound of birds singing. Everything felt normal, until I heard it. A voice. I stopped. Did I hear someone? I said out loud, scanning the woods. And then I heard it again. My name. It was my mom's voice, clear as day, calling to me. At first I didn't think much of it. She probably knew I was coming and had stepped outside to call for me. But then I realized something strange. The voice wasn't coming from the direction of my grandparents' house. It was coming from deeper in the woods. "Mom?" I called out, confused. "Why are you out here?" No answer. Just my name again. Same tone, same pitch. No urgency, no variation. Just the same exact voice, over and over. I started walking toward it, slowly at first. Maybe she needed help. Maybe something had happened. I called out again and again as she responded, always with just my name. That's when it hit me. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The woods had gone silent, completely. No birds, no wind, no bugs. Not even the faint hum of cars from the busy road just behind me. It was like the world had just stopped. My heart began to race. I turned, and that's when I saw it. Up on a small hill, partially hidden in the trees, stood a tall, dark figure. No face, no movement, just standing there watching. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until it was inside my house. The door locked behind me, every curtain drawn. I collapsed by the window, staring outside for what felt like hours. The days that followed were filled with unease. I felt watched every time I was alone, every time it got dark. I never told my parents. I couldn't. I was too scared they'd laugh it off, or worse, that saying it out loud would make it real again. A year passed. We moved to another town, and for a while, everything felt normal again, peaceful. Eventually, I forgot all about the woods. Then one night, months after the move, my cousin came over to hang out. We laughed, watched movies, the usual. He left late, and I went to bed not long after. To describe my room, my bed was right under the window. I laid down and closed my eyes until I heard it. A voice, my name. It was the way my cousin says it. Same pitch, same inflection, but it was wrong, distorted, and it was coming from right outside my window. I froze, eyes wide, breath caught in my throat. The voice repeated my name again and again. I didn't move, I didn't respond, I didn't even blink. It kept going for what felt like an hour. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Eventually it stopped, and to this day, I've never had another incident, and I hope I never will. I was hiding from your mom. My mom is dead. One of the creepiest stories I know personally is from my best friend. He was home at his house babysitting a friend's kid. The kid, whose name was Junior, was roughly 4 to 5, I want to say. His dad was a courier, so he would often be doing deliveries late at night. David, my best friend, was a teen by this point, so being home without an adult was no great task. It was important to mention that his father was a pretty paranoid individual who bought into a lot of fear-mongering in the world, so he had cameras set up all over the place. I want to say this happened in 2014. Anyway, David was busy in his bedroom and was minding his own business, but then decided to head into his den where all the cameras happened to be set up. But the den was locked. David knocked on the door and Junior opened it up. "Why did you lock the door?" David said. "Because of the lady," Junior said. "What lady?" David asked. "Your mom. I saw her in the kitchen." The house's living room was directly connected to the kitchen, and if you were standing in the kitchen's entryway, you could see the door leading outside. It was one of those screened-in sitting areas. Junior claimed that David's mother was right there in the doorway. Really strange, especially considering David's mother had passed away just about 8 months prior. David was chilled by the remark, but the skeptic in him knew it was likely just Junior's overactive imagination, so he agreed to go and check with him. He brought a kitchen knife. He walked with Junior down the hallway into the kitchen where the door was open. The door being open was pretty normal. It was a hot summer day and the house trapped a lot of heat. David stepped out onto the screened sitting area, looked left down the ramp his mother used to use to get outside, and nothing. He looked to the right, seeing the length of the yard. Nothing. Junior was insistent that there was someone there, which is strange considering usually in situations like these, kids tend to feel better after you poke around for them. David couldn't calm him down. Junior was certain. He kept saying, "I saw your mom, she was here." So David bargained with him. Everything's recorded on the cameras, so we'll just look on them and we'll know for certain whether someone was there or not. They sifted through the cameras and David looked for a timestamp around when Junior claimed that his deceased mother had shown up. He stared down all the cameras as the timer ticked on and nothing showed up. But suddenly, he watched as the camera showed a figure enter his backyard from the front by pulling the latch. An old woman, at least in her mid-60s, confidently walked into their backyard. She had a cloth grocery bag in her hand. She headed up the ramp and stood in their screened sitting area for a few moments. She then reached out for the door to the kitchen, cracking it open, and she brazenly stepped inside. After some time, Junior saw her in the kitchen and headed to David to tell him. Based on the camera's timestamps, she stood in the kitchen for at least 10 minutes. The absolutely insane part is, she left as David went to investigate with Junior. The camera footage showed her leaving as soon as he started looking around. When he had looked left at the ramp where she'd come up, she had already wrapped around and actually took the long way around through the length of the yard. When he looked right, he quite literally just missed her. It was genuinely a matter of maybe a half a second. Someone wandered right into his backyard and right into his kitchen, and then stood there for 10 minutes in his kitchen doing God knows what. Nothing was stolen, nobody was harmed or anything. Well, anyway, the night went on and nothing came of it. Some time passed, days, weeks, who knows. I'm not even sure how this information came about, but somehow David was told by either a family member or a staff member that the old woman that wandered into the house had dementia. She was having an episode of some sort and just found herself there by a string of coincidences. Hoofy, a true story a native inmate told me. This is an old story told to me from a few years ago. I was just reminded of it a couple days back, and I'm curious if anyone else has ever heard of this or if it was made up by the person who told it to me. I used to work at a maximum security prison where I was in charge of overseeing the production of food. Not a CEO by any means, and I was able to talk to the inmates very frequently. One early morning I was doing paperwork when one of the inmates was doing some sort of stalking and we were talking about urban legends. This man was Native American, I think Navajo, but I could be wrong. He will be dubbed Storm for the sake of this story. And Storm told me about a legend and an experience he had on his reserve about some sort of devil. A devil called Hoofy. He claims there is this handsome man with a tall white cowboy hat and boots that frequently goes into casinos. He doesn't gamble, he flirts with beautiful young women and lures them out of the casino. Once he takes these women home, he transforms into this tall creature with shaggy goat legs and long black hair. His beautiful face turns into a mix of a demonic horse and a wolf with piercing red eyes. He devours these women and leaves their clothing around his homestead as a memento of his killings. I laughed at it because it sounded like a typical monster, but Storm gets serious and tells me that he had a close encounter with Hoofy, and he barely made it out alive. Storm and his cousin lived in an Arizona reservation on the other side of South Mountain, very close to my hometown in Estrella Mountain. One day, he and his cousin were drinking and trying to pass the time as there wasn't much to do. They decided to take a walk into the desert, just for the hell of it. Not much else to do anyways. It was about half an hour or so from sundown, so the two tread off in a direction and enjoy the scenery of the plain desert. They walk for about 15 minutes or so when they come across this abandoned church-like building. It was old and decrepit with weak wooden structures that looked as though a stiff wind could break down the church. The two walked through the church and out the back, walking through broken pews and the floor creaking with each step. They laughed about how freaky and weird this old building was before slowly making their way out. They walk out the door and jump over a trench just past the back end of the church. The pair continued to walk and laugh when they came across something strange. Storm says that he saw a wide arrangement of shoes. Muddied red high heels, black flats, torn brown pumps, an assortment of women's shoes scattered around them that were broken and dirty, clearly abandoned for some time. Storm picked up a shoe to inspect it when he turned to his cousin. The look on his cousin's face was that of complete and utter horror. His face was pale and his eyes were wide, close to tearing, and he was looking behind Storm. Storm was about to turn around when his cousin stopped him. "No," he whispers, placing his hands on Storm's shoulder. "Don't look up. Keep your head down, man." Frightened, Storm follows his cousin's words. He had never seen his cousin so freaked out. Then he heard it, a pair of heavy footsteps walking behind him, the sound of labored breathing matching with the steps. Storm feels as though his whole body felt 10 degrees colder. His shoulders were shaking when his cousin pulled his hand and stepped back slowly. "We need to go." His voice was nearly lost in the heavy footsteps behind him, but Storm heard him just barely. "Whatever you do, don't look back," was the last thing his cousin told him before he booked it. The pair ran as fast as they could, sprinting past the old church and running to their homestead. His cousin yelled out native prayers in hopes that some sort of ancestral guardian would stop this beast. All while Storm could hear the galloping of hooves behind them, the feeling of creatures breathing against the back of his neck, hot and sticky breath smelling of rotten flesh motivating him to keep running no matter how tired he got. No matter how tired he got, he knew he would be this creature's next meal if he slowed down one bit. They ran, cutting their time back to their home in half. They made it safely back inside their home just as the sun was setting, bathing their home in a warm orange glow, panting against the wall. Storm placed a hand over his fast-beating heart, scared of what he might see, but he had to know. Storm stumbled to an outside window and pulled back a blind, peering into the dusking landscape. In the direction that they came from, Storm could see the back of the creature walking away. 8-foot-tall being with long silky black hair that reached its waist. Where human legs should be, instead, was a pair of long goat-like legs with black stamping hoofs that kicked up dust as it walked away. I went to a serial killer's lair. Here's a story I've never told anyone, partly because elements of this story are just not appropriate in most social situations. As a result, I've locked this away in my memory, and I rarely think about it. Fair warning, this story does involve some sketchy sexual situations, but does not describe any actual sexual acts. And as another disclaimer, I'm completely aware that this story involves me being very stupid and careless. I'm not going to inject these acknowledgments into the story, but rest assured that in hindsight, I'm aware of the foolishness that took place, and I don't need to be reminded on that topic. Now, where to begin? The year was approximately 1998 to 1999. I was a young gay man in my early 20s, living in a medium-sized city in the Midwestern US. This was sort of an in-between transitional time for gay people, where in most populous areas we had enough respect to live openly, but there were still plenty of people who did not like us. It was well before the invention of smartphones, and the internet was still in the early stages of mass adoption. There were large communities online, but it was not yet at the point where most Americans were online. Online socialization consisted of chat rooms hosted by various services like AOL, Yahoo, or IRC servers, and message boards were still in use by large numbers of people. For gay men at that time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Prior to the internet and the broader cultural changes, gay men had been stuck looking for fun in secretive and/or shady places due to the inability to freely express ourselves. In the 90s, it was still somewhat risky, but the internet offered a way to talk freely and relatively anonymously without the risk of being outed, or worse. For this reason, it really took off in the gay communities, and gay men were a very large part of the user bases for these social platforms. It was suddenly very easy and relatively safe to find dates, friends, or just sex, and it quickly became the norm for a lot of gay men. On the other hand, being such a new communication tool for most people, we were sometimes blind to the risks. Being an attractive young man in my prime, I made liberal use of online communities to find dates. That is to say, I had plenty of hookups. My city had a decent number of chat rooms and personals message boards, and I had mostly great experiences. I met the typical assortment of good guys, closet cases, and weirdos that you'd expect. I wasn't an absolute hoe by most standards, but suffice to say that a cute gay guy at the time could generally have a lot more dates than your typical straight person. At some point during this time, I'd had some brief chats on a message board with this guy from my city. I forget his screen name. It's been over 20 years, so let's call him Slim Guy 65. This back and forth had happened on a general thread in the gay section, not in private messages, so it was visible to anyone who chose to read that thread. Nothing had come of it, but about a week later, I received an email from an unrecognized address. The email basically said, "Hey, I'm not gay and I don't agree with the gay lifestyle. I'm here because my friend met this Slim Guy 65 person from this message board, and the guy really hurt him. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. My friend tried to tell the police, but they wouldn't do anything. I see you were talking to Slim Guy 65, so just be careful and stay away from him." Okay, that's strange. What does this person mean by really hurt him? Was his heart broken? Did he get beaten up or verbally abused or what? I responded to the email asking for clarification on what exactly happened. I never received a response. I was slightly weirded out by it, but on the other hand, it's an anonymous email from someone who doesn't respond and is vague about their warning. This could be anything. It could be some disgruntled ex trying to mess with the guy. It could be a real warning about someone gay bashing. It could be someone trolling who doesn't have anything to do with anyone. I kept it in the back of my mind, but pretty much shrugged it off. Several weeks later, I had a weekday off of work and decided to take to the internet to fish for some you-know-what, as was my custom. Lo and behold, I had an email response to a personal ad. It was Slim Guy 65. He was offering to meet at his place to hang out and just have a good time. Wink wink, nudge nudge. I won't go into details, and as I recall, there really weren't many details discussed other than the small talk and intros we'd done previously. Nothing about this guy really sounded interesting to me, but I had no other offers on this day, so I decided, why not? I'll go see what this dude is about. As I typed my reply, I suddenly remembered the strange email I'd received warning me about this person. I went back and reread it. Still vague, still preventing more questions and no answers. Should I take this anonymous warning at face value and just ignore SG65? I decided to check him out anyway. His address was on a rather busy street in the middle of a dense residential area, not some shack out in the woods, and I could handle myself. If he's weird, I could just fuck off out of there. Before long, I arrived at the house at the agreed time. It was a duplex-style house with one apartment on the ground floor and one on the second floor, part of a row of several identical duplexes. It was the middle of the afternoon, there was plenty of traffic on the street and the occasional person out on their porch or in their backyard. I pulled up the driveway to the parking area behind the house, got out, and knocked on the door. The guy that answered was a pretty normal, kind of mousy-looking man, probably in his 40s. Slight, slim build, soft-spoken. Looked like any guy working in an office cubicle somewhere. Not really my type, but honestly my curiosity was piqued and I had nothing better to do, so I stepped inside to take a look around and gauge the situation, with the warning email fresh in my mind. I stepped into the back door into the kitchen. It was very clean and there was nothing on the counters, and no table and chairs or anything. That is to say, it did not look like someone was living there. It had been kept up and cleaned, but looked empty. Looking out into the apartment, I could see that it was not set up as a living space. A large window with sliding glass was between the kitchen and living room, and I could see what looked like a large table in the living area. SG65 said something like, "This isn't where I live. A friend of mine used to run a doctor's office here. I maintain the building for him. It's private though. We have the place to ourselves." He shut the back door and locked it with a key deadbolt. The kind that you need a key to open, even from the inside, and put his keys in his pocket saying, "So, what do you want to do?" At this point, my danger sense spiked. This is not a normal home, and why is he locking the door like that? It's not necessarily suspect. A lot of people have that sort of lock in their door, and the door has a window, so it even makes sense. Still, something is not right here. I can tell. And now I'm locked in. I asked him why he was locking the door like that, which immediately flustered him. He was looking rather nervous, and his voice was a little weary and halting. Not quite stuttering, but almost. He said, well, we don't want someone to come in and interrupt us, right?" Flashing a weak, unconvincing smile, his demeanor and body language were all I needed to confirm that this guy was up to no good, or at least there was something he was hiding. However, I could tell that I was intimidating him. I was not a particularly muscular kid, but I have a larger frame. Like, even when I'm at my very thinnest, I still wear size L tops and 36 waist pants, so I look big, which people tend to interpret as me being stronger than I really am. So I'm not a tough guy at all, but I have a resting facial expression that makes me look like a badass thug. People who don't know me often assume that I'm rough or something. I sometimes use this to my advantage while I can, because before long a new acquaintance will eventually figure out I'm a total wimp. But this was definitely an occasion to play up the tough guy appearance, and I did exactly that. I put on my best steely face and told him to unlock the door and that I don't want to be locked in here. He looked up for a moment like he was going to pee his pants, and then he said, "Alright, okay, I'll unlock this." He unlocked the deadbolt, and "I'll just lock the knob here." And he turned the little dial that locks the doorknob. That was fine with me. I continued to stare at him until he said, "I'll leave the keys on the counter right here," and he set the keys down near the sink. I was relatively satisfied with that answer. At this point though, my adrenaline was flowing. I was almost in full fight or flight mode, but I was kind of stuck in place. The guy was between me and the door. I was freaked out, but this little weasel did not appear to pose any immediate physical threat to me. I could tell that his pant pockets were empty and that I was intimidating the hell out of him. I didn't know yet exactly what to do. Now, keep in mind that despite my wordy descriptions, this all happened very quickly, without any really long pauses. It had only been maybe 1 or 2 minutes since I had stepped in the door. This all happened at the pace of a conversation. The guy was obviously nervous and trying not to appear so. He said, "Well, let's go in," and walked a wide path around me through the kitchen into what would normally be the living room and toward the hall to the right from there. I was familiar with the floor layout, as it's very common in this area. The hallway would lead to 2 small bedrooms with a bathroom in between them. I hesitated, thinking I should just walk out that back door and take off. But really, now I was super curious. I knew there was no way in hell I'm doing anything with this guy, but I kinda wanted to see what's going on in here. Also, I'm confident that he can't take me if it comes to a fight, so I slowly headed towards the living room. It felt like I was walking in slow motion. From the kitchen entrance, I could see a large rectangular stainless steel table taking up a lot of the living room. I remember thinking this looks like a surgical table. It looked like it could rise and tilt, and it had a recessed channel running all the way down the edge. In hindsight, I now know what it was. It was 100% a mortician's table. Dude had a mortician's table in there. But at that time, I thought it looked like a medical table of some sort. There were some other office-type cabinets and stuff around, I think, but now all I really remember is the table in that room. The large front window facing out onto the street was covered by vertical blinds that were closed. SG65 said something like, "This used to be a doctor's office. Like I said, come on back here." The hallway revealed the room setup that I had expected. The first bedroom door was locked, the second door was open to a small, very clean bathroom, and at the end of the hall there was another bedroom, which looked like, if the doctor's office story was true, had at one time been converted into an exam room. He said, "We can go in that room if you want. Go ahead, take a look," and he stayed by the other closed bedroom door. The back bedroom door was open, and I could see that the walls were covered in a honey-colored wood paneling, the type you might see in a den or office that hasn't been updated since the early 1970s. I slowly took a few steps down to that door, trying to be very aware of what Mr. Creepy was doing behind me. He didn't move. When I got up to that room, the first thing I noticed was the door had a keyed deadbolt lock like the back door. This room locked from the outside. I wondered if there was a lever on the inside, but I pretty much knew the answer to that question without needing to check. I also saw a chair. A non-swiveling plastic desk chair with thin metal legs, sitting near the center of the room. The room had an old dark carpet and those wood-paneled walls. I noticed that the walls were completely paneled with no windows, and I know that room had at least one window, probably 2, so whoever did the paneling went over the windows. There was also a phone in there, plugged in and sitting on the floor. It was an old office phone, probably from around the 80s or early 90s, dingy beige plastic with several buttons to manage different phone lines. Just sitting on the carpet near the wall, with the chair at a slight distance facing the phone. There was nothing else in that room. I was standing at the threshold of that room with one foot slightly in, absolutely not going past that door. I looked back at Dude. He was still standing by the other door, just nervously smiling at me, trying hard to look casual, but obviously very nervous or something. He said something like, "Well, what do you want to do?" Instead of answering, I felt around the backside of the deadbolt lock. Sure enough, nothing was there but the smooth wood of the door. It also dawned on me that I did not see a light switch anywhere for the ceiling lamp. Where was the switch? Who knows? It should have been just inside the door, of course, but that original switch was covered up by the paneling. He mumbled something about not having the key to that lock. Don't worry about it. I turned back to face the guy and just said, "What is it that you want to do here?" My skin had gone ice cold as I realized that I was way too far into this apartment. I was running through my options in my head. What is this guy going to do? He doesn't appear to have any weapon or anything in reach, but who the fuck knows what goes on in this place? What are you trying to do? He was almost totally derailed by that. He stammered out, "Some hot man-to-man fun?" With the weakest smile I've ever seen, looking like he was just a hair's breadth away from panicking. That sounds comical, but really that sentence was probably the most chilling part of this entire experience for me. It was the way he said it, like he had to come up with something on the fly, something that would sound plausible, and he failed. Who says that in real life? Hey, do you want to have some hot man-to-man fun? Nobody. It's something you'd see on an advertisement for a cheesy porn site or something. That was it. I said, "Nope, I want to go, I'm leaving." He said, okay. I quickly walked past him as he flattened himself against the wall to avoid me. And I noped right through the living room dissection area and through the kitchen to the back door, which was thankfully still not deadbolted. The keys were still on the counter. I let myself out of the door and didn't bother closing that as I saw him slowly coming to the door behind me. I deliberately walked, not ran, to my car. Looking back at the building, I could see that indeed there was a window facing that backyard area from that paneled room, but of course it was covered up from the inside. Dude was shutting and locking the back door. And I left, heart pounding, skin icy cold, thinking, holy fuck, what was that? So, was this guy some kind of killer? Or was he just an awkward, closeted gay guy with access to a sterile-looking apartment with an autopsy or mortuary table, and a windowless room that locks from the outside, with a chair and a phone and no light switch? It's clear to me that the poor soul who walks into that room gets locked in. He probably shuts off the light from somewhere and calls the phone. Other than that, it's anyone's guess what happens. I assume the friend of the judgmental person who emailed me must have been some kid that got locked in for whatever game ensues. Driving home, at first I thought of course I have to call the police and tell them what's in that place. But thinking it through, I realized I didn't really have any crime to tell them about. I went to meet a man for casual sex, and he has a room with a chair in it? He has, as I thought at the time, an exam table? The police aren't going to do anything with that story. The guy didn't touch me or do anything to me, and I left. I considered calling an anonymous tip line, but again, what exactly would I report? There was no actionable crime. Also, keep in mind that at that time, while the local police in the city were pretty decent, they weren't especially interested in getting involved with helping the gays. They'd prosecute the actual crimes if it was cut and dry, but I'd heard plenty of accounts of them not choosing to follow up on cases where there was not an easy arrest to be made. I decided not to report anything because nothing would come of it except drawing unwanted attention to myself. Even in retrospect, I think that was probably the most rational choice to make. If this happened today, the law enforcement would probably be a lot more interested in it, but back then, not so much, so live and learn. I still drove past that house once in a while in the normal course of life over several years, and I'd pay attention to how it looked. The vertical blinds were closed for maybe 5 or 6 years whenever I went past. Then eventually the blinds were down, and there were decorative curtains in the window, so I assumed the place was eventually sold to someone who actually lived in it. Around 2002, maybe 2003, there was a murder of a young man on the news. He'd been found in the next state, which borders on my city, so not very far away. I recognized the guy from the gay community, but didn't know him personally. A friend mentioned to me something about the local serial killer. I said, "What?" He explained that a few young men had gone missing over the past year, each after being at one specific dive bar, and each being found several miles to the north past the state line and out in the country. The case on the news matched up with that MO. My friend told me that the young guy had been at the bar and left with someone the night that he disappeared. The news report didn't mention anything about a gay bar or similar recent cases, of course. I had to wonder if my acquaintance from the internet had anything to do with it. I never heard of a resolution to that murder on the news or any official mention of a suspected serial killer. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like, review, or a comment. As always, the original stories are linked down in the description below, and I claim no credit for the stories themselves. Be sure to follow the show everywhere at Scary But True Pod. And if you have your own scary story that you'd like me to share, email it to me at scarybutTruePod@gmail.com. My name is Michael Messerly, and I'll see you next time with more Scary But True.